Welcome, everyone. I'm just adding people as they sign in, and we'll get started in a couple minutes. So we are just waiting a few more minutes. I am expecting Katrina Huff, our chair, to be joining soon. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, okay. We are.
Robin, this is Isla. I think the problem might be the link you sent about this afternoon is actually the June 3rd meeting link. It's not the same link as to this one. I started in that meeting and it said
Oh,
waiting to let you into the June 3rd meeting and no one came. So I
okay.
checked the actual invite and it's to this one. So people maybe if you want to open up the June one, let people in and let them know that the link is wrong. That may be why people aren't here.
Okay. I still have people joining, but I'm going to put myself on mute and do that with my phone because I don't want to disconnect all my connections here. Thank you for letting me know. I did.
Hello, this is Anna speaking. I went to the other link that was in the recent email, so probably that's what's going on with some other folks.
Glad it wasn't just me.
I'm just going to jump on that other link and see if anyone's trying to get in there.
Hey, Nick, I'm just on for a couple minutes. I've got a budget hearing thing tonight, so it's 6, but I just wanted to jump on and say hi for a couple minutes. So, hi.
Hi, Virginia.
Thanks for coming, Chairman.
Absolutely.
Okay, I am not able to open that link because it says I'm hosting another meeting. So I'm hoping people get that message. I'm just going to send an email out real quick to make sure everyone has the right link. And I really hope they figure out my mistake. And we'll get started here in just a minute. Okay, Isla, can I ask you to chair as our co-chair?
Sure, absolutely.
Call the meeting to order and we'll get started.
All right. This is the Parent Advisory Committee meeting for May 13th, 2026. I am Isla Erchin, the co-chair of the meeting. I am calling the meeting to order. And I'm sorry, Robin, if you give me a second, I don't have the agenda open, so. Okay. I wasn't able to open the agenda from the board site until you sent it just a little bit ago, so I haven't looked at it very
Okay.
well.
So did the slide deck change now? Because you can just use the one that's on the screen or
Okay,
do you see
okay.
them?
Yes, I can see it. Okay. So it looks like we are going to be talking about introducing ourselves. Let's start by going around and sharing our name, what school our students are currently at or formerly attended, and if we were ourselves a PPS student, where we attended. I'll start with myself. Again, Isla Erchin. She, her pronouns. I am not from Portland. I am originally from Atlanta, Georgia, but my kids have gone to PPS since kindergarten. Both of them. I now have a Selwood middle schooler and a Dunaway fourth grader, about to be fifth grader. So about to have two middle school students. So excited about that. I am going to pass it to Anna if you want to go next.
Hi, Anna Adarujo. I use she, they pronouns. I am also not from Portland. I've been here about 5 years. We were living in California before this, but have lived all over the country at various times. My kids attended Creston through fifth grade, at least for the period of time since we moved here. And they are both at Sunnyside for middle school right now. I have a sixth grader and an eighth grader. And my eighth grader will start at Franklin next year. So I will have had sort of experience with three schools next year. And I think that's it, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And actually, I'm going to ask you to go next, Virginia, because I know you have to leave. So if you could introduce yourself, I don't know when you have to jump off.
No sweat. I've got about 10, 15 minutes tops. My name is Virginia LaForte. I am a member of the PPS Board of Directors, and I live in Zone 5, which is Northeast Portland, but we represent all students in the district. And I'm also a PPS parent. I have a sophomore in college that graduated from Grant, a current Grant High School sophomore, and many years ago, my oldest spent some time in Alameda. So that is my PPS story.
Okay. I am just going to go down the faces that I see. I see you next, Kelly.
Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Oh, good. My name's Kelly Orhovec, and I use she, her pronouns. I have two kids. One is currently at Roosevelt, and I have another kid at Ockley Green, and both my kids went to Beach Elementary School up in North Portland.
Thank you. Daniel.
Hi, my name is Daniel Levine. I use he, him pronouns, and I have a first grader going to Ride a Mile in Southwest Portland. I'm from the Bay Area, so I didn't go to PPS, but that's all.
I think we now have Della and Lily, but I'll start with you, Della. Are you, I think you just joined. So if you're just joining, we are sharing our names, pronouns, what school we attend.
I'm Della. My pronouns are she, her, and I go to Lincoln.
Okay. And then I think Lily, I saw you, although.
Yeah, hi, sorry. I was having technical problems, so I had to leave and rejoin. But yeah, my name's Lily and I'm a junior. I go by she, her, and I'm a junior at Roosevelt.
All right. I do not see anybody else. Oh, well, Nick and Robin. Let's also introduce you, of course. So Nick.
Thank you, Isla. Hi, everybody. Nick Brodnicki, he, him. I am the interim executive director for the Fund for Portland Public Schools and excited to join everyone tonight.
Robin.
Hi, I'm Robin Ferone. I'm the Director of Strategic Partnerships for Portland Public Schools. So I work for the district, and Trina is I'm trying to get the link to her still, but she's trying to join. So
We will get her. Is quorum here 50%? Do we have a quorum? Let's see, we need 6. Let's see, 1. Though we may not be making any decisions today, so I'll just go forward then and talk about the public meeting rules. So we report to the school board. So we have to follow the same public meeting laws that the school board does. We're considered a subcommittee of that. So under the public meeting laws, all meetings must be properly notified to the public, held in a public location where people can observe and attend, and have a virtual option, and keep appropriate notes. We also need a quorum to make decisions. So our quorum is 6 out of 12. And I think, let's see. Lily, Della, Daniel, Kelly, Anna. Okay, we have a quorum. We can decide everything. Let's just make all of our decisions. So we have a quorum, and all meetings need to be in public. So we can't decide to get together, 6 of us, and have a special session where we talk about what we want to do. We need to do that in a way that the public is able to access that information and see and evaluate our deliberations. So that doesn't mean we can't, have conversations one-on-one, but we don't want to have run afoul of those public meeting laws. It can be a little bit tricky. So we'll try to keep all of our discussions here to the extent that we can. All right, we can go to the next slide. Okay, so we're just going to talk about what we decided last year. And so last year we had $1,030,000 to distribute. That was our inaugural year, and we had to decide what we were going to do with that money. That was in our, in our title is distribution of funds for staffing. So I think that was a big part of our sort of decision. I was actually just looking back at the old slides and watching the old video to refresh my memory about all of the options we had been presented with. And it started with, what if we just give an equal number to each student? What if we all go in on digital? What if we do high impact tutoring? What if we look at these food pantry interventions? So we're given sort of a menu of options and possibilities. And this is what we came up with. I think there was a lot of emphasis at the time at looking at what would sort of be in alignment with the idea of bringing staffing to the greatest number of schools, since that was what had sort of why the committee was formed. But we also saw that there was a need for seed funding for future fundraising. So at the time we put in $100,000 in hopes of sort of creating a more stable future, and food pantries in 20 community schools, because we really wanted to. We had a community, we had a couple presentations, and one of the presentations was one of the greatest needs that people are asking for is that students can't learn because they actually don't have enough to eat. So we need to satisfy this very basic requirement in order to allow education to happen. So that was a fairly large number, I think disproportionate to what it would be in subsequent years, because I believe it was for setting those up. So there was additional money for sort of like building out the space. And I know we'll have some potential proposals for what we might want to do. So I think we can talk about what it goes into that, but I think it's less, not because we're giving less, but because less is needed in terms of like actually creating those spaces. But we can talk about that. So that was the total distribution last year, $1,030,000. And then I am going to pass it off to Nick, who is the interim executive director of the Fund for PPS, to sort of talk about the fundraising that's been happening since then, what the impact of this recommendation has been, how that the money has, what kind of successes they've seen in using that money, and then potentially talk about what we might do with the money that's been raised for next year. Nick, take it away.
Thank you, Isla. And Robin, do you mind going back a slide too?
Oh, sure. Let's see if I just go. Yeah, there we go. And also, Katrina Huff was able to join us. She had a bad link that I sent out that June 3rd meeting. I'm so sorry. You made it. So we did introductions already, Katrina, but maybe you could just introduce yourselves and then we'll go back to Nick was just about to present.
Hello, everybody. I am Katrina Huff, and my daughter goes to Benson, so we're in the Benson cluster, and also a former PPS Benson student. I'm not sure what all introductions you guys gave. Currently, I went to the 1803 fund. That's it, maybe? I don't know. I'm sorry.
It was just name, pronouns, school your kids go to, and if you went to PPS yourself. And you said,
did you go to Benson too?
Yeah, I went to Benson. My daughter went to Benson. And I have a 2-year-old, and I'm hoping that he also goes to Benson. And I'm currently cooking one. I don't know if you guys can see, but she will also be going to Benson. So there's a
long line of Benson.
Yeah, hopefully we can make it happen.
I thought you meant you were cooking dinner. You're cooking another baby in there?
Yes.
Congratulations. That's sweet. Okay. Thank you. Sorry about all the technical difficulties. Nick, would you like to take over?
Love to. So I'll get started with the idea behind this slide and talking about students served against the allocations. So this, a system at scale is new for the district. Measuring that success is something that is an early moving target for all of us. So as it stands right now, on this slide, we do have included students served just to give an understanding of the kind of reach that dollars have for a per student basis, but it doesn't quantify the actual impact associated with that. That's what I'm going to talk about. And that's also what is a moving target because especially when you think about high impact tutoring and the IXL digital math skill building, that's not done yet for the year. So we're still in the process of looking at how these interventions, academic interventions, are supporting our students. With that said, lots of positive early results. So related to the choices and recommendations from the PAC and the school board last year, the high impact tutoring was spread across 45 PPS schools. Some of you might know this already or have heard this recently, but we're going to say it for the sake of public record. The 45 schools participating in the program did include 15 schools supported through PPS reading support EA model and 30 schools through reading results, which is a contracted partnership. The student success in the program is related to a couple of key factors. So there's timing involved in this academic intervention, happens during a what I need block, that WIN block. This takes place during the school day, but outside of core instruction and especially in elementary schools, all students receive something of some kind during WIN blocks. It depends on the school and the student, but we're not doing something wildly different here, right? This is a part of the school day. It helps sit within the flow of education. There's frequency that's important involved in this intervention. Students meet 3 times per week for 30 minutes. per session with their tutors. There's a methodology there that's peer reviewed and data driven for the instruction in small group settings. And then there's a duration across this entire engagement for up to 30 weeks that could be reduced if a student hits benchmark earlier and maybe needs a different kind of academic support. But we're mostly just talking about the system model here. Across how that program works, or I'll combine everything just kind of into one bucket of high impact tutoring. We know that right now there's about 1,200 students that have been served this school year. In academic interventions, minutes of instruction time are very important. In this case, we're closing in on 1 million minutes of instruction time, big number there. And the outcome, as it stands right now, that is most interesting is we're talking about just over a 30% average growth for students' reading comprehension just after 20 weeks. This is related to what are called the pilot sites, where measurements are taken for the sake of benchmarking how this program's doing. This is by all accounts, a really good investment in the district alongside what consolidated budgets can fund throughout the school year. So we're seeing a lot of success. We're hearing that across the board from district administration, teachers, the interventionists, the tutors that are a part of this, and students themselves. Do we want me just to report out on these and then we can just ask questions after that, since we have 3 of them? I don't know if, Robin, you have feedback.
Yeah, let's maybe run through it so people can see what the asks are, and then I can return to any of these slides if people have specific questions.
Love it. Okay. So thank you, everybody, as we walk through these for a couple of minutes each. So we have high impact tutoring, and on the next slide, we have IXL Digital Math. So this is a skill building and assessment tool for 9th and 10th grade students. While I wasn't a part of decision making in the PAC last year, it's my understanding this was of interest to the student representatives. And as such, it is impacting students very positively thus far. So there's a total of 19 total schools for grades 9 through 12 that can and do benefit from this program. You can see the 8 comprehensive high schools all have access. And then there are a number of alternative and specially focused high school programs that have access to this platform. I'm not going to read them all out, but you have their names there on the slide. With that kind of access, one of the more important pieces is district staff, the teachers, being able to identify the students that get funneled into this program, because not necessarily everybody needs it. Same for high impact tutoring for the elementary school kids. So while there's 7,000-ish students that could have access, about 2,200, there's an extra number in there, but it's 2,000 and change. So there's about 2,000 students who have benefited because they've been identified as needing this kind of support. We're about 1,200 ninth graders, almost 500 10th graders, around 360 11th graders, and just over 300 12th graders. And this comes directly from the team administrating this platform. As a district, overall growth is seen at every level. And on an individual level, there are some students that are able to gain 2+ years of math skills as evidenced by their benchmark assessments. I think that's a pretty incredible result. There are certainly some students that have not shown improvement. You don't necessarily get that across the board. And more data will be available at the end of the school year to help support an understanding on just how impactful this is across the board. But we know that the preliminary data suggests that this math support does result in a positive impact. And where that impact is happening is still to be determined, whether that's at home or in school when this platform is accessed. So this is a differentiated intervention from high impact tutoring, which is all in person, and this being on the other end of the spectrum where it is digitally based, where you can engage with it at home or in school for that matter. So you've kind of got two ends of the support spectrum that the PAC made decisions on last year that the school board and the Fund for PPS supported, and both have been positive thus far by all accounts. We have one more report to give, and that's for our impact on food pantries. As Isla said, this is the third place where the PAC made a recommendation to the board. This one's a little bit different. As a reminder to everyone, for the other types of academic interventions, this monetary support absolutely supports student success, but in a different way. So the Fund for PPS, via the decisions from last year, invested $200,000 in food pantries in 20 community schools. These are Title I, K through 5, K through 8 schools. These decisions were made according to a needs assessment conducted by PPS community school site coordinators for the district to understand where access to food was a first priority by families that was desperately needed in most places. There were certainly contributing factors that came about during and after this decision process related to uncertainty of funding for hunger relief work. And that included, the federal government and their commentary and actions around SNAP benefits, the USDA, how states are allocated dollars. So the PAC decided that they wanted to prioritize food. Certainly some of the federal narrative came afterwards, and this decision supporting those families in times of need. So as it pertains to how this worked, in most of the schools, school-based pantries were implemented and supported through these funds. Through community partners such as Oregon Food Bank, SUN, or other community-based organizations, there were these pantries that were set up that allowed for regularly stocked needed items that in many cases supplemented something that was happening in the school, or more often set up a new system that did not exist in the school. These are often operated with partnerships just because of bandwidth by teachers, administrators, district staff, volunteers. That's why you see those other entities listed because they're often partnered with schools on this kind of delivery. Related to that delivery and the preliminary results, right now we know that about 6,700 students have been served with these dollars. And given that there were two major socioeconomic and political events that impacted food security in our community, this funding both was a good decision and became an even better decision to help schools support families that were directly impacted by the actions of the federal government and other entities. In the 20 schools, about 80% of them have shown positive attendance outcomes by virtue of these dollars. These things can only be tracked so directly, but we know this to be a pretty reasonable percentage increase, 80% showing positive increases. Of the 20 schools who were not able to demonstrate growth in regular attendance because of this funding and this access, it's pretty heavily considered that other factors played a role into either maintaining of attendance or a decrease. Often that would include immigration enforcement raids and large numbers of unhoused or homeless students. I just want to say, as related to these preliminary results, there are no schools listed for the sake of not drawing attention to the communities that are most in crisis and most affected through some of the actions that are outside of our purview, whether those be federal, state, or otherwise. And we're just focused really here on the percentage increases and the impact that has been able to be directly or indirectly measured so far. So I'm going to use these three funded approaches to share the general requests via these same entities, programs, departments, sections of PPS. So For the school year 26-27, there are preliminary funding requests. As it stands right now, these requests are related to what we have been funding in the past, because as the fund for PPS is building out its governance alongside the district, amongst all the conversations that I have had as the interim executive director, and that a number of district staff, administrators, teachers, principals, and parents have had, looking at new types of support or existing types of support, but that would be new for the PAC to look at, didn't, at least right now, seem like an appropriate path to take, given the amount of funds we have available currently. And simply, this is also new, and a modicum of continuity to at least one of these funded approaches seems right now like a really sustainable, positive approach for the PAC and then the students that ultimately derive value from these decisions. So as it stands right now, we have fielded preliminary requests from each of the teams that have been engaging with the dollars that have previously been deployed. The high impact funding requests has two options. One is for $133,000, $134,000, another for a lower amount, $105,000. Those requests are to fund additional schools to the schools that are already receiving high impact tutoring intervention. So funding is in place to serve 40 schools for this coming school year. PPS reading support EAs will serve in 9 SDLIs and co-located SDLI schools offering tutoring in English and Spanish, and reading results will serve 31 schools. That is already in place, and there is certainly support needed for other schools. So an opportunity for funding could include one of these options for high impact tutoring that comes alongside what the district will already be doing.
Nick, I had a question about that.
Sure.
It's on the other slide, impact of high impact tutoring. It says 15 schools through reading support specialist, EA, and 30 through reading results. That's 45. And when I was looking at these examples, it only made a difference to me that the 40 is what they've sort of pulled together funding for from other places, in how we decide to make that, because it doesn't, is it new schools? Because if it's only 40, like I see 6 and I'm like, okay, well, we have to at least get 6 to cover the 45 we did last year, because that'll only get us 46. Because if we only do 3, then that's 43, and we did 45 last year. So was it 40 or 45? Because it makes a difference when I think about what, how important the distribution of new schools is.
45 within the current school year. And, the count, again, we know that there are students at tier 3 with critical needs in each school, regardless of the kind of funding that they get per pupil. Just the reminder, I know you know this, Isla, but for the sake of everyone else, the fund won't make those decisions, nor will the Board of Education. That comes from the district teams that look at the data for the rank order of what schools have what kind of need for that next number. There are, to your point, Isla, absolutely 6 more schools that need that kind of support. And if we want to distribute the money, the PAC feels like the suggestion to distribute that money could be used in 2 ways instead of just one, given how much money we have right now. There is the option to serve just 3 schools, and the district high impact tutoring team would work on potential, right? I don't want to speak for them, but they would work on potential paths for those other schools that they feel still have need. So 45 to answer your question.
I think, Kelly, you had a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I did have a question in terms of how does the committee determine what those 6 additional schools would be?
That's up to the district administrative staff with the data that they pull through their process, working with the superintendent's team to understand what schools have what needs. We would simply be funding their identification of the next set of schools.
So that there is that they have the data so they have it already like ranked in order of like the number of students and how far below benchmark they are. So they've already identified like what would be the next set that could be added. But we don't have that information, and it's not something we want to share because we don't want to be making decisions based on who those schools are or what it is. It's about like numbers of students being served. We also wanted to clarify that when we met with the learning acceleration team, they wanted to make sure that people understood these are not the only reading interventions that students are getting in PPS schools, and that many of the schools have an instructional specialist or a reading specialist whose job is to meet with students either in small groups or one-on-one and provide this same type of support. And when you have a smaller number of students, that you would be able to provide that individualized support. It's when the numbers start getting really large that that they start ranking the needs with these other models. So that makes sense.
And are you able to share what the data they use to determine which schools would receive this?
It's like the reading assessments that PPS does. There's more than one, but yeah, they're looking at those benchmarks. It's basically how many grades below their benchmark of where the student is that determines whether they're tier 1, 2, or 3, whether they're meeting it or they're below or they're far below, that type of thing. Yeah.
I saw Lily and then Trina, and I'll look and see if I see anybody else. But Lily, if you want to ask your question.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
So I noticed here it says like high school. So would it be mostly targeting like older students in high schools? And are there specific grades it would be targeting within the high schools?
So thank you for the question, Lily. Related to IXL, that is with the way it was rolled out this past year was a high school only focus. Robin might know about other opportunities to leverage that platform. I know as it pertains to 9th through 12th grade support, the funding amount listed here would be solely focused on like a licensing agreement. So you can have X amount of students with a license that are identified. Anything outside of that, especially if you would to move towards middle school or anything lower, would probably be a different kind of, frankly, procurement process for contracting. And I don't know that that's something we would necessarily receive through this process.
Trina?
I have a few questions. Remind me the difference between the reading support EAs and the reading result.
I would first say, Robin can probably give a slightly more nuanced answer than me, but the first thing I want to say to respond to that, Katrina, is the difference is mostly focused on the kind of support identified via the benchmark assessments. Then from there, it's tailored to the student needs. So different schools receive different types of opportunities based on the amount of critical students that they have in their school building. The very specifics of like how it's delivered is not something I'm particularly focused on knowing. So I can't answer that. Robin might be able to provide a little more context.
Well, the PPS reading support EAs, the ones that are they have funding in place for is because they're dual language immersion schools with English, Spanish. So that's a specialized, type of tutor who's bilingual and can do it in both languages. And then Reading Results is a private, separate nonprofit that PPS contracts with, and we've kind of maxed out their capacity of serving PPS schools at 31. Last year it was 30. But they're a close partner with PPS and they're implementing it in the same way that they can compare results across the board, but it is slightly different. They do it with 3 students and 1 tutor, and the EAs are one-on-one typically, the internal staff. And so the proposal to add additional PPS reading support EAs would be not the bilingual ones, but it would be a way to serve more schools, given the other capacities are taken up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and so with the proposal of the 6 EAs and 2 lead teachers, are those two lead teachers have a different role than the support EAs, obviously? Are they
Yeah,
like
they're like
just regular PPS?
supervised.
Go ahead.
So
Sorry.
they're like required to supervise the tutors. It's like you need to have the capacity, the expertise. Um,
Gotcha.
so that's why there's 2 lead teachers if you have 6 schools and 1 lead teacher if you have 3 schools. And it's really it's like extended hour pay. So it's not hiring a teacher. It's like they're spending extra hours to support and train and supervise the tutors.
Okay. My last question, and then I think that I'm good for this portion. With the math skill building assessment, the IXL digital math, there was a capacity to serve, I think, roughly 7,000 students from what I remember, and the number came in at like 2,500. Are we paying for that at per student, or is it just 70 grand flat?
That is a good question. We did not get nuanced answers on that. We can go back and kind of ask for more information. What our understanding was the 7,000 would have been if every 9th and 10th grader used the IXL platform. And I think there were decisions made in how to implement the program once they were applying it in the high schools, that a more targeted approach to students who were further behind using it, and it wasn't like applied across the board. It probably had to do with like limited instructional time and like needing to cover the core time in the class with math, but I can ask that question specifically and provide a follow-up.
Yeah, and I guess sorry, I just said one more question, but this is kind of a follow-up to that question. My wonder is, if we had a capacity for 7,000, why would we target 2,500? Kind of is my question.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I will ask that question. I
Okay.
think the licenses were like applied by school, but how they ended up using them, I think, differed from what they originally planned to do. So,
Okay.
and I don't think they were originally planning to do the alternative high schools. So that might have been yeah, they might have changed course with that. So that was not really outlined in the 2-page kind of summary they already gave us. So I'll ask the follow-up question.
I will also add, just from a visioning standpoint for the fund for PPS, if there is something that we're looking at that is meant to be distributed across all schools, a digital platform or otherwise, that tends to fall outside of the supportive support that the fund for PPS is generally focused on, like what our board is focused on, fundraising and or communications for the strategic direction of the fund. Though something that would support like all schools, all students would be a consolidated budget focus that the district and Dr. Armstrong's office would work on first. The fund is always looking to bring those funding for those supportive measures for the most critical students that maybe aren't served as much as needed, or they need more support, I should say, than a general budget can cover for them.
So you're saying the goal is not to service all schools?
Well,
That's not the goal.
the goal is to serve all students who need our support. And if a platform is used for every single student, that would be a district focus, not a fund for PPS focus. Our focus is definitely all students with the most critical needs across the district.
Trina, do you have any other questions?
I have a lot of questions just from what he said. But I think I will take a moment to formulate them. I may, yeah, we may just come back to the,
That's what we're here for. I
questions.
have in Daniel Kelly in the queue. Daniel hasn't spoken before, so I was going to let him go first.
Yeah.
And Kelly, are you, is that residual hand or is that a current hand?
No.
It's a leftover hand.
So, Daniel.
I'll put it down.
So first I wanted to apologize because I know that I missed the meeting a month ago. And so maybe some of these questions have already been answered, but so when I see the preliminary funding requests, I would be interested to know what the seed money for fundraising accomplished, or sort of how much fundraising happened, and what kind of funding is available for this year versus last year. Maybe that's already been answered or will be answered, but when we're making considerations of these requests.
Great question, Daniel. Go ahead, Robin.
Well, I was just, I'll let you say the amount. I was just going to say the $100,000 seed money has not been spent yet. In the fall of 2025, we began, the Fund for PPS Board of Directors began recruitment for an executive director with some support from staff, logistical support. And they interviewed candidates and made an offer, and then the person accepted a different offer, and we then pivoted to finding an interim executive director. And so so Nick was not brought on until February, I think, was when you started.
Correct. Just past 90 days at the end of last month. So to Robin's point, Daniel, that money has not been implemented, but we have plans for it in the next couple of months to be able to raise more dollars, but there wasn't someone to spend it yet for the sake of fundraising. Related to this year, I'm going to get the number wrong because I'm not looking directly at it, so I can keep this screen up, but it's $153,000, 156, Robin?
I think it's 152. So we were just going to kind of go with 150,000.
Flat number for the moment, $150,000. And the PAC, these are all really good questions, and I want to make sure that we're answering them through this process. I think the thing from my point of view, operating the fund for PPS right now is your questions most related to how we might want to deploy that $150,000 that we have right now becomes the most focused outcome that I'm excited for, because it allows me to continue whatever the narrative would be to funders. What is it that we're making decisions on? What money, where is it going? Because we know the kinds of outcomes, preliminary outcomes from the three funded focuses for this school year. And as you're thinking about decisions or for a suggestion for the Board of Education for this coming school year, that suggestion really helps me be able to continue a narrative for funders.
Nick, is the 152 that was raised, is that over 1 year or 2 years? Because I know there was full fundraising last year and then fundraising this year. Is the 152 the result of 2 years or just?
It's like a year and a half, basically.
So the full last year and year to date, because we had closed out the year.
Yeah, we're not including like the April fundraising, the PPS giving campaign. So this is like it probably
year and a half.
Yeah, it's like the December. That's really ideally when you would have the money so that the district can then plan. Like you know, like the ideal would be next year the pack would get started earlier. We'd know how much we have by January and could make those decisions. We're kind of, so that's as of December 31st, 2025, it's $152,000.
Daniel, I didn't mean to jump in. I was just trying to clarify. Your hand's still up. Go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. And correct me if this isn't the right time to ask it, if we're just sort of getting in the weeds based on compared to the actual agenda of the meeting. But so am I understanding correctly that when we first made these decisions and we had $1 million to work with, those funding amounts I thought was just going to be for 1 year, but it sounds like you said that funding is in place for 40 schools for the tutoring for this coming year too. And then we only have $150,000 to work with for further planning versus $1 million to work with, or am I? And I guess I was a little confused too that we were only having like a couple of meetings this time rather than all the meetings that we had last year.
Yeah.
And is that sort of because we didn't have an executive director until now, and that we're sort of now doing it, and that's why it's different this year versus last year?
Yeah, there's a couple of things in there, and you're touching on a number of governance points that fall to the fund for PPS's board, and then a policy that falls to the Board of Education. So tends to be outside of our group's purview. As it pertains to the cadence, you're absolutely right. We didn't have an executive director. And folks like Robin work for the district and give some of their time to the fund for PPS. So we weren't able to implement a regular cadence for this year, given an executive director was meant to come into the process much earlier. I am here now, so we're working through that process now. Related to the $1 million, that was money that was brought into the fund for PPS when the consolidation happened from the local school foundations. Since then, that 12 to 16 months of fundraising, which was not led by like an executive director or a fundraiser directly, resulted in that $150,000. The 40 schools that are being served by other funding sources. So that money is not coming from the fund for PPS. The district administration that manages high impact tutoring found other ways to make that happen, making their own balanced choices along the way, because within the timeline that budgeting decisions were made, I was like 2 weeks into my role. So we hadn't gotten to any of the typical operations for the fund at that point.
Okay, that explains a lot. Okay, so so for this coming decisions, we saw these amazing results from the things that happened before. We have much less to work with now, but it sounds like the district came up with the money to do some of it in alternative ways, which is great. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot of timing involved in this that is not ideal, and we're working into an ideal cadence for the kinds of decisions that need to be made to support student success.
We're ending at 6:30, not 6, is that right?
We had allowed for, we made it a little longer because we had fewer meetings. I wasn't sure if we'd take the full time today. I think we would like to get, some discussion going though among the members of the committee about these proposals, and if there is more information or other proposals that you need data around that we could bring to the June 3rd meeting, because the hope would be that will be when a final vote will be made at that meeting next month. So we need to know all the information that you need to make a decision.
Robin, I wanted to see if we're able to have a discussion, if we could take a step back. To our original sort of mandate was to decide a formula how the money will be distributed going forward. And I think last year we didn't come up with a formula because there were so many unknowns and we were sort of presented with alternatives which weren't numerical formulas. But I wonder, and this is just for me throwing it out to the group, that with this very small amount of money, $100,000 a year is what I could see being raised here. If maybe it's time to actually come up with a formula, because I don't know if it's useful for us to have a 12-person meeting about how to distribute $100,000 in a multi-million-dollar budget. It might, and I'll ask this to the fund, is it more useful for you to have this static formula that says, we don't meet unless you raise at least $1 million. If you don't raise $1 million, spend it all on staffing, and then some parameters within there. So you don't have to, when you talk to donors, say, I don't know what it's going to be used for this year. It's out of my hands. Like, is it more helpful to always have a static formula, which is kind of what it was like. I think when I thought of it, it was supposed to be like this formula that we create. Would that be helpful at all to the fund? Is that not helpful in your discussions?
When I guess the definition of formula is what's on my mind, Isla, for this kind of conversation. I like your framing there, because for me, and I didn't hear you say math equation. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I would assume a lot of people think formula and they think math equation for like dollars. And what I'm thinking about is more process when I think about formula. So how do we receive and then make decisions on the places where the district needs more support, students need more support? That's a narrative that's easy for me to be able to communicate to funders, corporate sponsors, others who would be interested in supporting the fund and these students along the way. So I haven't personally thought about like thresholds for different levels of support. I think I'm most hopeful that when we walk away from these conversations next month, regardless of us being able to add money to this pot or just having the $150,000, that the PAC feels like they have a strong suggestion despite a smaller amount of money to be able to present to the Board of Education, and I can continue to use that in my narratives.
I think there's a real challenge of scale and in the idea of creating a static formula. I think the PAC last year talked about, if we raised $4 million, we could have a halftime EA in every school. That's what, the salary amount would be if you had, looking at 81 schools. The scale is just quite large. So I think it would, even if we had some type of formula, it would be kind of aspirational. Like, once we get to such and such mark, like this could be a guide. But I think what Nick is pointing to is like more of like the intention behind it, and like what types of things we're going to support that donors also will be excited about, rather than an abstract of like, well, we don't want to turn people off to say like, oh, well, we're not going to get to that, so we're not going to give. You see what I mean?
Yeah. I think, Nick, you didn't cover the food pantries. I was kind of curious. So it looks like we don't have funding for the 70, but we do have funding for the 50 food pantries. Does that sort of meet my hope? Was that we've set them up, 50 is enough to get them staffed, fund, and full of supplies, so we can do the same thing we did last year? Or is that not enough? Because it was 200 last year.
Yeah. There was a number of schools that didn't have a food pantry already and used, so there was more money used for purchases, and this would be, the 50,000 would be more targeted to the highest needs schools, because there are some schools that have more partnerships in place through Sun or other nonprofit, culturally specific partners, other supports, and the the landscape is changing constantly. You know, like there's a food bank in a school and then the food bank loses its money to cover that. And now that school has nothing. So it's like to be responsive to emerging needs and the schools that need it the most, rather than across the board, everyone needs to get set up and going.
Lily, I see your hand.
Are we taking like into consideration like seeking out more donations or like trying to accumulate more of the funding? Because I've repeatedly heard like talking about how we have less money this year. And what would like seeking out donations look like? And like are there specific donors that are like likely to go after?
Great question, Lily. For the sake of a public meeting, that's a great offline conversation. So I don't really want to talk about certain people on the public record, and it's a good question. To answer you, though, we're very much in fundraising mode right now. We have a couple of initiatives happening, and a couple of, I would call it like a coalitions of support that are coming together for the sake of funding. I wouldn't feel confident saying that money would be received and in the fund's bank account by June decision-making time, but we have the intention of bringing in a lot of those dollars when they hit bank accounts this summer and then into early fall. So yes, very much intentionally fundraising right now. Glad to talk to you and receive feedback and hear your questions outside of this meeting as well. And the timing for decisions for the PAC will probably not initially align with our fundraising timeline for dollars in the bank.
Trina, you're first in line. You're back. You thought about it.
Yeah, well, I have a whole different question. But so how much do we have total to allocate for this year, or will we be voting on allocating this year?
For this coming school year, it would be the $152,000.
152. Okay.
And then Daniel, you're up next.
So I guess just piggybacking off of Lily's questions, and it sounds like you're not really doing it yet because you just came into the role and we're figuring it out. But when we do use the seed money, or we do have fundraising events, or the fundraising events that you're currently doing, not that I need to know individual donors' names or anything for the public, but in terms of like other events that we could know about that would be sort of specific fundraising efforts, like whether it's some kind of, I don't know anything about fundraising, some gala that, you know, we invite people to do things for this purpose. Are there events like that that maybe she could know about, or that we could know about?
Absolutely. That information would not come during a PAC meeting, and it would come from communications directly with the fund for PPS, and absolutely be sharing all of that.
Trina, you have your hand up. Is that a residual hand?
Yeah,
or?
so I just have a follow-up because I guess I'm not following, and that's probably my fault. But so we have 152K to allocate for next year, and then there's also the 100K that we set aside for fundraising last year to fundraise for this year. Is that 152 including the 100K in fundraising from last year?
So those are that money, the $100,000 and the $152,000 are two separate pots of money.
Gotcha.
The $100,000 is earmarked for fundraising and has contracting that is being set up to use that money to raise more money.
If I could ask two students, last year, the reason IXL made it so high on the list is the two high school students loved it. They were like, I love this program. Have you used it, Lily or Della? And do you love it?
I haven't used it in high school. I used it a lot in elementary and middle school, and I think that it was really helpful for me because it's a tool where you can like repeat skills that you've learned. So I think with people, especially high schoolers who are struggling with math And if teachers don't necessarily assign a lot of homework, I think that it could be a really helpful and useful tool.
I haven't used that in high school, and I'm not 100% sure about middle school. I don't think I did, but part of that might have to do with the fact that I went to an alternative school, elementary through middle. I went to MLC. I don't know if you know what that is, but I don't think I've used it.
Has it been offered to you guys in high school?
No.
Nick, I'm sort of taking your first introductory sentence that you're looking for consistency and that's helpful to heart. When I look at IXL, does it mess anybody up to lose it? Do we know that? Is that a Robin question? Like, does the budget cover it some other way?
So what they said is that they don't have funding in place for it. It would be really nice to have, and they're still like evaluating the models and where it would go. And so there isn't like a real like solid answer for that question. We, yeah, I mean, we could ask a question like, if you had 20,000, what would you do with it? Or we could ask something like that, or how would this be deployed? Or, but I'm not sure that they're going to have a full plan by June 3rd either.
I don't think we need to go back and request it. I mean, I think I've seen a lot of pushback from parents about digital platforms and the use of money on digital platforms. It was more just, I just wanted to make sure, it sounds like at least the students wouldn't miss it, at least on this call. It sounds like no one's clamoring for it, but maybe.
Yeah, I know my daughter used it with a tutor. Like it's sort of like it's like a tool that is for targeted skills of like what you're missing and then getting caught up, a type of intervention. And I think when the PAC discussed it last year, there kind of was more appetite for older students to be doing that and kind of self-directed learning rather than younger K3 students doing a digital reading platform. So, and it was a way to be able to serve high schools and to be able to do something towards math as well. So lots of things to weigh there.
That's true. We had a high school parent last year, and there was sort of a sense of a lot of these kind of reading interventions are at the much younger grade level when folks are obviously learning how to read. With this level of money, I don't know if we have, if that's a level of detail that we can get into.
I think it was presented last year too that we would just get so much bang for our buck. Like it would be district wide and we would be serving so many students. And then to kind of hear, I know as a PAC, we wanted to and we intended to serve all students in all schools if we could. And so to hear to say that the board decided on our behalf that that is not their scope, I just wish that we would have had that information last year. Maybe we could have made a different decision. Because I just don't want to feel like it's a resource wasted. Because it literally hinges on whether or not we decide to fund it again this year. And so it's just, yeah.
I think
that there is different ways of interpreting district-wide. I think what mostly people have talked about, like touching all schools and the students who need it the most. Where a lot of the district budgeting is by school, and so the intention here is that we have an approach and a strategy that is not just divvying up money by school. But I understand what you're talking about, and there's sort of different levels of decision making and governance where, we're giving the money and then the district is like figuring out how to deploy it in the best way. And I think there was a change in strategy that, and sometimes those kind of proposals of how many people will be served by it. I mean, I do a lot of grants and you don't always reach that goal. So a lot of the goals are aspirational. Like this is the number we hope to serve, and then there's like the actuals and like who you could reach or like what was the model. So I will reach out and try to get that answer. I can send out an email for like further clarification around this IXL in particular. I think I wish I knew more about that. I'm sorry.
Well, and to be fair too, not to interject, like when we had a bigger budget, it was less than 1/10 of the budget,
Yeah.
and it did affect a couple thousand students. And according to Nick's slide, it seemed to have a huge improvement for a lot of the people who did use it. Now that our budget's 150,000, maybe we decide in the June 3rd meeting whether it's still something we would do.
And Nick, I'm sorry, I think I misunderstood the last food pantry one. There isn't funding for that? I thought the 50 was what we had to spend. I know we have 152. Neither of those are fully used in the option 1 and option 2. So
as it stands, that 50,000 is not coming from anywhere else currently.
Okay. So it looks like so the goal here, Robin, is to decide at the June 3rd meeting among this menu of options, which looks like we decide option 1, option 2, and then if we don't use all the money, 150, then we can talk about whether we are able to fund food pantries or IXL. But I do think last time and this time, we're given a very specific list. And I do wonder if if anybody has any broader questions. I do think it's not a lot of money, so it may seem but if we can ask for other ways to spend that money or questions, I don't think we need to be hamstrung by this. I think we can choose a different route. That's what we're here for. Anna?
If we did not fund the food pantries, would that be reducing the capacity of what exists currently? Because I don't think we want to ever cut that back if that's like, I just want to make sure I understand what this $50,000 would do.
It's sort of a moving target because the food landscape is so like really volatile. You know how food prices are going up constantly as of late. And we do know that there's a number of partnerships in food bank and different things in place. I think this is to supplement. It's to serve like the schools that don't have enough partnerships in place, and it's to buy culturally specific foods. And there was a lot of grocery shopping and delivery to families who did not feel safe leaving their homes. So like anticipating if that is going to continue, and the SNAP benefits are becoming more restrictive. There's now work requirements and things that are really hard for people with insecure housing and disabilities. And, so it's the kind of thing where there's a lot of need. There's a lot of different resources in the community, and yet there's still going to be need. And any amount is supportive.
Okay, thank you. I would not want to cut that if we could avoid it, but let's see as everyone decides.
I mean, it's only $150,000. What if we put it all to food pantries? I want to go crazy. Nick, what would you think about that? Then maybe it'd be great fundraising because we got so much money on the special appeal. It seemed like people were really, focused on that. It really helped with fundraising. to be like, this is a very specific thing we're fundraising for. SNAP benefits are about to be cut.
Yeah, it would. I mean, the first thing is we'd go back to the team to see if that is an appropriate, sustainable approach. Because if that's something that continues to be the most interest for the fund for PPS to come alongside and the PAC to receive information on, then yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It certainly supports academic success. It's not, by all accounts, a direct driver of it, but then again, you need food to be able to perform academically. I don't know how to make those. I'm not really sure how to comment on that in a way that supports the funds board, my execution, and then what the district is asking for or what these administrators are asking for. So
Are they
it's a
staffing money? I mean, it's such a small amount of money. It seems unrealistic to think that the 100,000 is going to make it like.
there's no staffing associated with those dollars.
No, exactly. Like that we need to focus on staffing.
Yeah.
100,000. Like, I don't feel like we're under with this smaller amount of money that we're under that restriction because it's not going to get staffing.
You mean for the food pantries?
No, staffing for like if we put it in for hiring 3 additional schools, reading supports, like maybe it's better spent on giving people food. Like I don't know what the fund for PPS is saying in their sort of outreach. Like we are fundraising. I don't think they're saying we're fundraising for staffing. I think they're saying they have priorities and you go to their website and it's, that's not really the prime thing. So maybe that's the more appropriate use of the funds in terms of your messaging.
General messaging, I would say, messaging directly to folks one-on-one or in small groups is focused on data-informed student success. So where could we come alongside consolidated budgets, where consolidated budgets, even in the best of budgeting times, do not still support the full success of certain students in every school. And that is that's most of our narrative focus right now.
Daniel.
So I guess we can decide more of this in the next meeting where we're actually making final decisions, but that would be a big departure from what we all planned last year, though, because the whole, and I guess there's been a disconnect, and it's not your fault at all, Nick, that we thought that this year there was going to be all these fundraising efforts, and a lot of the things that we chose last year were really made to be things that would almost advertise to parents to donate to things that they thought would be similar to staffing, because this is the Parent Action Committee for staffing. And so they thought originally that they were donating money to staffing, and now this money can't be used that way in the foundations before, and so now it's being put into something else. We couldn't provide staffing to all schools, like Robin pointed out. So we used the money as best as we could to put as many human beings into schools as possible, which was why we did the high impact tutoring and things like that. So if we're now going to take a total but I guess that never happened, that we never used those ideas to be the impetus for people to now come out and give more money to the fund, because we never had fundraising events that focused on trying to get them to do that. So, not blaming anyone, just like sort of saying what's happened. And so if we now switch completely to say, okay, now we're just feeding people, even though I want to feed people, that was sort of the debate last year, was we were saying, okay, well, even though we all want to feed people, would people feel like they were still giving to a fund that is about staffing? Or would they think, oh, well, we could give to providing food to people in other ways too, but this is supposed to be about staffing? So I guess that's sort of I want to make sure that it's still something that advertises to people to want to give to staffing. But you're right, if we don't have enough money to do that, then it becomes a whole new conversation. I guess I'm rambling a little bit, but you know what I'm saying? Like, we made all these choices last year with the focus being, hey, this needs to advertise to parents who want to give money that their money is going to go towards what they originally thought this was going to be, which was providing more human beings in schools for people.
I think
so. I guess we can have more conversation about it next month, because I know it's already 6:22. But
it's my 30-second response, Daniel, because that's a really important point you bring up. Is The fund is focused on student success. That can look like staffing. It can look like other kinds of support for students that isn't covered by a consolidated budget. I fully respect the previous discussion and an ongoing discussion related to what local school foundation funding went to before. But I would say from a narrative perspective, the fund is focused on student success. It absolutely can and does include staffing. It also includes other kinds of opportunities like digital support services or food pantries for that matter. Not saying it's the thing that needs to be covered right now, but it falls within that student success bucket.
I do think that it can be challenging to have outcomes to report on the food supports in particular. Uh, we can get some quotes and stories, but there's also like privacy, and there's not a lot of like probing into things that we want to report, like around the immigration issues and that sort of thing. And so as you know, fundraisers for the district and a person, involved in helping secure private resources for the district for the last 10 years, I think that there is a benefit in having measurable outcomes that you can report and having more than one thing when you're trying to serve a district as large as ours. So those are just a couple things to consider. Um, uh, and if there are, yeah, I can go back to the administrators for each of these and get, more information about what the proposed impact would be of different dollar amounts, as well. So that could be some additional information for next time. Are there any other questions or things that?
Sorry. Kelly, did you disappear? Kelly, it doesn't say you're on mute, but we can't hear you. Kelly, if you're talking, we can't hear you. Okay. Let's see. I think does anybody else have anything? We'll see if Kelly can get back on.
Does it make sense to recap what the PAC is requesting ahead of the next meeting? Because I heard some requests for more information along the way. I think there was a range of those, maybe between Isla and Robin. Robin, what you have written down, if we could say those things out loud so we make sure we're all on the same page, because that helps me too from my position.
Yeah, let me just read about the food pantries. My question would be, what would they do if they had less or more money? So what would you do how would you use the funding differently if you had 20,000, 50,000, or 150,000? Would that be helpful to know?
Yes.
Okay. And then around the IXL, I had, since we had originally planned to serve 7,000 students, why did they end up serving 2,000 and some instead? What changed in the plan between what was proposed last year and now? And do they have any funding in place or like a range of like what they would need? And because I don't know if that's like if the licenses are per school or per student, like just to give us a more of a formula breakdown of that.
And I guess I wasn't totally clear on the just to go back to the food pantries one. Can you ask in your question whether if they don't get the $50,000, if they'll still be able to provide the same service level that they have this year? I'm not entirely clear on that.
Okay.
So it's like, is the 50 an add-on, or if it goes away, they're not gonna be able to meet the current service level?
Okay.
And then were there questions about the actual high impact tutoring? Questions about that? Because it seems like we have what presented here is 2 options to choose between: 6 schools, 6 EAs, 2 leads, 3 EAs, 1 lead.
I will say that the for option 1, the 133,000, that they said that would put them at the current service level that they're doing this year in terms of the number of students served. And
Option 1.
if we added option 1, yeah.
Okay. So the district's managed to find funding for 40 schools. Do we anticipate that continuing?
They were able to use an early literacy grant for that to cover that, but there was not enough for the full capacity.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Kelly, you could feel free to email me if you had other questions you wanted me to add as I'm getting these questions answered. And once we'll try to get, Nick and I will talk, and if we have the information sooner, we'll get it out to you ahead of the meeting and not wait till the June 3rd. And feel free to reach out if any other questions come up that you want us to clarify and prepare for the next meeting, because really it will just be a discussion. We'll report back on these and we'll have a discussion. So to the extent we can have as much information as you need for the next meeting, we want to be able to support you with that.
Good.
Thank you all for your time and the questions and comments and all the great feedback.
Thank you, Robin. I know this is probably a big organization project for you. That's somewhat where my question was like, do we just come up with the formula and not meet again until, because I know it's a lot of your time to put all this together for us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night, guys.
Yeah.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night.